Scholomance Academy has arrived. Well, it has for you guys. It hasn't for me yet, but soon, very soon. Even though the cards have arrived, I'm betting the meta hasn't settled yet, so we're still doing reviews. This time, we're looking at the remaining cards for Shaman, including a legendary minion we will meme so hard with, it'll blow up our opponent's board along with their face. Let's get into it. This should be interesting. Before we hop into the reviews, let me note that we review cards a little bit differently here. So if you haven't seen earlier reviews, there's a card above linking to review number 2 where we explain the criteria if you'd like to watch the intro of that video. There's a time code for quick reviews with puns in the description below for those of you without much time. For everyone else, let's get into the main reviews. Last time, we saw some impressive card draw with spell damage via Cram Session. It makes a lot of sense to pair that spell with Lab Partner, which we looked at as well. But what if we could get extra copies of Lab Partner or other spell damage cards at a reduced cost? Well, we can. Primordial Studies is a 1-mana spell for mages and shamans to discover a spell damage minion and make the next spell damage minion you play cost 1 less. This is how we go even crazier with Azure Explorer in getting ridiculous value from spells and dragons. Stacking these discounts to play a 7-mana Malygos also opens a few possibilities. Although Scholomance will be out by the time this review goes live, for this review at least, we're still looking at pre-release data when referring to the current meta in our assessment. Neither Totem Shaman nor Galakrond Shaman have spells to benefit from a spell damage minion, and Highlander Mage doesn't have too many that would make this exciting to slot in, but no Minion Mage has quite a few spells they would love to see improved by this. I bet they would include a copy or 2 of this if they could. In the upcoming meta, alongside the Cram Session card draw that mages are getting, I am so excited to build a spell damage mage. Shaman doesn't have nearly as high a payoff for extra spell damage as mages do this time, but spell damage Lava Burst finisher decks have gained a little bit of popularity recently, and this will be a great way to give that a leg up towards the meta. The power level of Cram Session paired with this alone makes me think that would be good enough to earn a spot in the new meta, but alongside the next card we'll look at, Primordial Studies is a shoo-in for the future meta. For meme decks, not only can we use this to discount spell power minions like Malygos for a big burst damage turn, but we'll also be able to pair the extra spell damage minions we discover with the legendary minion we're looking at next to do ridiculous amounts of damage to our opponent's face and board all at once. I'm excited to try out a meme deck with this. So what's an absolutely amazing payoff card for running minions with spell damage? Let's look at the really cool dual class legendary for shamans and mages we mentioned briefly during the last review, Raz Frostwhisper. He's a 5-mana 3/6 with an end of turn effect to deal 1 damage to all enemies, and the damage is improved by spell damage. What may be the most important thing about Raz's ability is that it can go face as well as clear the enemy board. Wow. So in Mage, we'd love to pair Raz with Lab Partner, Mozaki Master Duelist, Astromancer Solarian, and Azure Explorer. In Shaman, you'll never be happier that you roll a spell damage totem, and he'll work well with Squall Hunter and the new weapon we'll cover soon. Perhaps this is enough of a payoff to run Lady Vash? Maybe. But both classes will love pairing Primordial Studies with him to practically guarantee a higher damage board clear. Neither mages nor shamans currently run any spell damage minions other than Astromancer Solarian, and without a chance to get more value out of his effect, he's just a little too weak to make the cut in any current meta decks. However, with the additional spell damage tools arriving with Scholomance Academy, there's a really strong chance Raz finds a home in a mage and a shaman deck in the new meta. Azure Explorer will finally do more than just discover other dragons. I'm hoping a cool dragon and spell damage hybrid deck will be able to find its way into the meta. We alluded to it earlier, but Raz Frostwhisper will be an awesome card to get extra copies of with Potion of Illusion. We can drop a couple 1-mana 1/1 versions of him alongside a couple discounted Sorcerer's Apprentices and Mozaki Master Duelist. It'll be awesome to pop off with a bunch of low-cost spells and annihilate our opponent with absurd burst damage to their face and board. It'd be great if we can get extra copies of Potion of Illusion or Primordial Studies from Wand Thief to help us set up an even crazier burst turn. But I'm looking forward to the experiments we can do with Raz. This is gonna be so much fun. To finish off the dual class cards for Mage and Shaman, let's look at Trick Totem. This 2-mana 0/3 totem casts a random spell that costs 3 or less at the end of each of your turns. There's so much randomness packed into this thing, I'm not even sure I really want to touch it. Totem Shaman is an exciting archetype that's been doing really well lately, and if we're lucky, this could cast Totemic Might, Totemic Surge, or even Totemic Reflection. It could also kill itself with Lightning Breath, Bog Beam, or Shadow Bolt. And almost any other crazy outcome is possible with 256 spells in Standard that cost 3 or less. Totem Shaman would shun this due to the danger of it backfiring being more problematic than the few occasions it works out to help the deck. Galakrond Shaman could throw it onto the board early in the game just to distract opponents, but this wouldn't be appealing in the late game, so I don't see them making room for it either. Highlander Mage could slot it in, and they've had relative success with RNG from Puzzle Box of Yogg-Saron and The Amazing Reno. It might be a nice replacement for one of the popular cards, and the spells are unlikely to backfire too hard on Mage since they don't develop too much onto the board early on. I wouldn't recommend it per se, but the potential to cheat out a couple cheap spells that might work out in our favor might be a reason to give it a chance. I want to see it in action, but we'll give it a super questionable could be meta now. This still won't go into any respectable Totem Shaman deck in the future meta, but Control Shaman might be able to drop it onto the board to buy some time and try to eke out some value from it. I don't know that Trick Totem will help Control Shaman climb into the meta, but alongside some other cards for Shaman we're looking at today, it feels like there's a good chance it can make it. In a slower deck that doesn't care about the board early on, but would be happy to get a little extra value if it works out, Trick Totem might make the cut. Again, it's questionable, but the average result may be good enough to earn it a slot in one deck. Man, this card is weird to assess. But if we decide to lean into the RNG, then we can build a Totemic Reflection Totem buff deck really aiming to get as much value out of this RNG as possible. It will probably blow up on our faces about 30% of the time, but that's how we figure out what's gold. We might discover something really cool while experimenting with this. So yeah, we'll build some bizarre decks around this. So aside from the totem we just looked at, today's cards have been centered around spell damage minions and amazing payoff for having them. Well, minions aren't the only way shamans can access spell damage. They also have Rune Dagger, a 2-mana 1/3 weapon with an effect which reads, after your hero attacks, gain spell damage +1 this turn. So if you want to prepare a turn or two before for some spell damage to be ready to make Raz Frostwhisper even better when you drop him, Rune Dagger is one way to set that up. Not only does this pair well with a control style of deck likely to run Raz Frostwhisper, but it actually supports an over-the-top Lightning Bolt and Lava Burst aggro style of play really well. A modified version of Totem Shaman might be able to use this really well, but as they're built right now, neither Shaman meta deck makes good use of Rune Dagger. But whether it be a newly empowered Control Shaman or an aggro burst damage Shaman, I think the value from Rune Dagger will make it too good to pass up in the new meta. And while this caps out at +1 spell damage, it is one more way to stock up on spell damage alongside minions discounted by Primordial Studies to pull off an amazing burst damage turn, either with Raz Frostwhisper or a bunch of cheap spells. There should be something crazy we can do with spell damage in Shaman, and this will help set that up. So Rune Dagger is a meme deck enabler. One new way for shamans to benefit from improved spell damage is this next card. Molten Blast is a 3 mana spell to deal 2 damage and summon that many 1/1 elementals. As this can go face, this looks pretty nice alongside Rune Dagger we just covered, followed by a couple Storm's Wraths to keep the tokens alive, giving us a chance at a Bloodlust lethal follow-up if we're not too overloaded to pull it off. The Molten Elementals summoned by this would be useful for setting up a Bloodlust finisher or as a buff base in Totem Shaman, or for evolving in Galakrond Shaman while this spell does a bit of damage to the face or board. But unless they happen to have a spell damage totem from their hero power, 3 mana for this is just too inefficient compared with the rest of the cards in their deck. I don't think this would make the cut at the moment. But Rune Dagger alone, bumping this to 3 damage and summon 3 1/1s may be enough to merit slotting this into a deck. Alongside Primordial Studies, and possibly Lady Vosh or Squall Hunter, the power level of this rises enough that it should certainly find a home in the new meta. So if we fill our board with spell damage minions, we actually get less benefit from the summon effect from this. Fortunately, Rune Dagger doesn't take a space on board, but when trying to figure out meme ways to use this card, I realized that the max number of Molten Elementals we'll be able to summon onto the board at once is 5, unless Malygos is just hanging around. We could build a ridiculous damage deck that fills the board with spell damage minions and burst the opponent with this and being like, we don't need no elementals to finish you off. That's not functionally different from killing our opponent with a super spell damage lightning bolt. And there's no elemental synergy at the moment either, but we could use the tokens generated off this alongside a Squall Hunter and Knife Juggler to shoot 5 knives at opponents. It's a bit weak, but it will be interesting to pull off, and we should be able to figure out a fun way to top it all off, so we'll say this can join meme decks. Now, if you're looking for a super control shaman tool that is even crazier with additional spell damage, you may want to look at Tidal Wave. This 8 mana spell with lifesteal does 3 damage to all minions. In the right circumstances, you could go from 1 health to 30 just by casting this. Rune Dagger turns this into a Chaos Nova that heals. It's expensive at 8 mana, but if your opponent floods the board right after you clear it with Earthquake, this may be the perfect follow-up. Both Totem and Galakrond Shaman are interested in taking the board with minions themselves, so this would be counterproductive and far too slow for them to include. However, there are a few tools for Control Shaman and Highlander Shaman to make waves in the new meta. If one of those is strong enough to climb into the ladder, there's a good chance this makes the cut. Alongside Raz Frostwhisper and the other dual-class legendary for shamans we'll cover in a moment, I think there will be enough support for a spell damage infused Control Shaman to make it. So I'm going to give this a hopeful meta later. As this destroys the board when played, it's a bit odd to pair into a combo deck, but since it is nice and expensive, it would be great as an activator for a King Phaoris deck. Alongside Eye of the Storm, Earthquake, and the other big spell shamans and druids are getting, I think we can make a pretty interesting control the board till we drop King Phaoris deck. Tidal Wave does enable some memes. So Tidal Wave could be one of the options we get when playing the following card, but you'd probably rather choose something cheaper the first time. Instructor Fireheart is the Shaman legendary for Scholomance Academy. She's a 3 mana 3/3 with a battle cry to discover a spell that costs 1 or more. And if you play that spell the same turn, she'll help you discover another spell. Instructor Fireheart is basically a better statted Vulpera Scoundrel with amazing upside potential. If shamans had access to Sorcerer's Apprentice, this would be broken powerful. Though, even without them, Instructor Fireheart still feels amazingly powerful. With an effect like this, you're probably not going to want to tempo her on turn 3. But even if you do, you'll still discover another spell you can use to help you in whatever matchup you're playing. It will be a bit of a balancing act between waiting to get more value from her or discovering a more impactful card early. And when you have the discover options, do you choose a cheap spell that you can play out in hopes of discovering another spell you can use? Or do you take the tidal wave you can't play now, but you'll be able to clear the board with in a couple turns? This is a fun card with lots of things to consider. The Shaman quest will also allow us to get some extra value as well. Totem Shaman is a bit too aggressive to get value from Instructor Fireheart, so they wouldn't slot her in. But as a tempo card to get extra value and still be able to evolve her if she sticks to the board, I think Galakrond Shaman would throw her in place of the Totemic Reflection popular card. She would see play right now. And with her potential in Control Shaman, Quest Shaman, and her status as a better Volpera Scoundrel, there's no way she gets passed over in the future meta. Without Bog Slosher in Standard anymore, we can't get quite as much value out of Instructor Fireheart in Quest Shaman as we could have before, but there will still be ways to get more value from her, even if we have to eat 2 mana with a Youthful Brewmaster. There may also be something we can do with this and Dwarven Archaeologist. At 7 mana, we could play out both Dwarven Archaeologists alongside her, and as long as we keep getting a spell option for 1 or 2 mana each time, we could go infinite. We'll see how much value we can eke out of her. Now let's look at the cards Shaman will share with Druid. This first card is an absolutely brilliant merger of Shaman and Druid tokens. Runic Carvings is a 6 mana spell to choose between summoning 4 2/2 Treant totems as regular minions, or give them rush by choosing to overload for 2. Now, these Treant totems have the Totem Tribal tag, and will count as Treants for discounting Aeroponics or getting buffed by Goru the Might Tree. With the rest of the Treant synergies gone from Standard, I don't think Druid is too excited to run this. But summoning 4 totems at once is pretty exciting for Shamans looking to use Totemic Might and Totemic Surge in a powerful way. And the overload on this has potential synergy in a different direction as well. So this is an amazing totem generator, but surprisingly, I don't think this would fit into the current form of Totem Shaman. It's currently built as a very aggressive deck looking to overwhelm opponents quickly. This would be a very nice reload after a board clear, but it will be a dead card in hand until turn 6, at which point the original version would be finishing off their opponent. It'll certainly fit into a less aggressive build, but this doesn't match the current game plan of the deck well enough to cut a different card. The other deck this would be a contender for is Dragon Druid, as they run Glowfly Swarm at the moment. This is a guaranteed 4 minions on board, while Glowfly Swarm can low roll and only get 2 or 3. But most of the time, Druids can expect to get 4 or more 2/2s, and this costs 1 more mana. The rush aspect is interesting, especially if paired with Power of the Wild or Soul of the Forest, but Dragon Druids are usually hoping to stick a wide board of minions, rather than trade them with enemy minions. I don't think this would quite make the cut in Druid decks either. With so many token generators available to Druid right now, it's possible Token Druid could reemerge, and a slower form of Totem Shaman that uses an overload threat such as Vicina might be able to use this efficiently enough to include it in a meta deck. I think Shaman is more likely to succeed with this than Druid, but we'll give this a hopeful meta later. And Goru the Might Tree is coming back with a vengeance in meme decks. Runic Carvings will help us flood the board, possibly alongside Loosened Bark and the next card we'll look at. In Shaman, alongside Totem Goliath, we'll be able to build board after board of totems to swarm our opponents to death. Actually, nearly full Totem Shaman may be strong enough that running every totem card available might not be enough to call it a meme. But Goru gets to meme at least. This next minion would be happy to see Runic Carvings, or any other high cost spell in your hand. Groundskeeper is a 4 mana 4/5 taunt minion for Shamans and Druids with a battlecry to restore 5 health if you're holding a spell that costs 5 or more. Like we said a moment ago, Loosened Bark is coming back. He'll still be terrible, but we've got 1 more activator for him. So this is an amazing stall and control tool. Not only is this a Chillwind Yeti with taunt, but it will heal you, or a minion, if you've got a high cost spell in hand. Now in the current meta, the only spells for 5 or more mana that see play are Bloodlust, Glowfly Swarm, and Overflow. And sadly, the decks that run these cards aren't interested in Groundskeeper. But we've got some nice new tools for Control Shaman and Highlander Shaman coming. And quite a few of the spells to run in those decks cost 5 or more. I think Groundskeeper is an excellent fit in those decks, and I'm thinking that one of them should be strong enough to climb into the meta. While Druid has quite a few excellent activators for Groundskeeper as well, I don't think she'll see play unless Token Druid makes a comeback. Even then, I'm not sure she'd make the cut, but Shamans will give her a place to shine. Loosened Bark memes are back, and we're going to play Groundskeeper with him for sure. Let's go. So if you've got a big spell to activate Groundskeeper, you may want to play it to activate the spell burst on Speaker Ghidra. Speaker Ghidra is the 3-mana 1/4 dual-class legendary minion for druids and shamans with Rush, Wind Fury, and a spell burst effect to gain attack and health equal to the spell's cost. So you don't want to play the coin right after dropping her, or else you'll cry because she won't get any bigger. Ghidra is a bit awkward. She has Rush and Wind Fury, so you want to trigger her spell burst right away to get immediate value. But a bigger spell will give her better stats. But if you wait until the next turn to play a big spell, you aren't getting value from her Rush effect, and there's a decent chance your opponent will have a way to kill her if she's just at 4 health. So she'll either be a mid to late game card for druids alongside a 5 or 6 mana spell, or a more mid game card for shamans alongside 3 or 4 mana spells. While Speaker Ghidra would gain +2/+2 from Storm's Wrath in Totem Shaman, she'd be decent at fighting for the board with Flametongue Totem, and if she miraculously survived on board for a Bloodlust follow-up, dealing 18 damage with her alone would be amazing. She requires those synergies or failed answers from opponents to be any good in the deck though. She's also awkward for Galakrond Shaman, and the Druid decks aren't looking for this small of a minion to join them. But really, she is amazing with Bloodlust if you can stick her onto the board for a turn. It would be nice if we could protect her somehow, but I'm not sure how she lines up for the new meta. Most of the bigger spells from Control Shaman would kill her. Still, if she pairs with a 3 or 4 mana spell on turn 6 or 7 to become a 4/7 or 5/8 with Rush and Wind Fury, she'll still feel pretty good. Druids can ramp quickly enough that playing her with the Guardian Animals spell in a new Survival of the Fittest Beast Druid would have a really big impact. I'm not sure if that archetype will make it into the meta, but I can't bring myself to say that a minion with Rush and Wind Fury that can become medium or large sized based on the spell paired with her won't find a spot in a meta deck. All these effects shouldn't be underestimated. I'm just hoping that throwing them all together with the low base stats didn't make her too weak. We're doing it a lot this time, but let's give her a hopeful meta later status. In a meme deck with her, our goal will be to help her survive a turn behind a taunt alongside Robes of Protection so that we can drop a Survival of the Fittest the following turn and turn her into an OTK all by herself. In Shaman, if we do the same thing with an Eye of the Storm, she'll still be able to do 22 damage, but the possibility of pulling off a combo with her and Survival of the Fittest in Druid is something we absolutely have to do. That's all the cards left for Shamans, but there are a few neutral cards that will pair quite well with Shaman's new or already existing tools. For example, Quest Shaman could use this next card to get some amazing extra value from Dragon Queen Alexstrasza upon quest completion. Tour Guide is a 1-mana 1/1 with a battle cry to make your next hero power cost 0. While he may initially seem like a new copy of the complete failure from Rastakan's Rumble, Waterboy, Tour Guide has several benefits that make him so much better. First, at only 1 mana, this is an actual discount to a hero power for any class but Demon Hunter. Ha! Second, the discounted hero power doesn't have to be used the same turn as Tour Guide is played, meaning this can be used to set up a future turn for use with hero power alongside something else. For example, in the current meta, Dragon Hunters could drop Tour Guide on turn 1, and then drop Phase Stalker on turn 2 to hero power and pull a secret from their deck immediately. That seems good enough to see play in the current meta. Face and Dragon Hunters would be happy to give Tour Guide a home, and Totem Shaman could use him pretty well as well. In the new meta, Hunters will probably still be the class most excited to see Tour Guide, but there's room for Quest Shaman and maybe even an aggro Paladin deck running Righteous Cause to play him? We'll see, but there's no question a Hunter list or two will use him. As for memes, it may be interesting to drop a Scrapyard Colossus in Quest Priest on turn 10 and immediately buff it by +3/+3. And if it's not a meta combination, playing Tour Guide in a Highlander Quest Shaman to set up an amazing Dragon Queen Alexstrasza will be an awesome power play. It might also be fun to combine this with an upgraded hero power in Highlander Shaman, but I'm not sure that there are any build-around combos that are exciting. Still, Tour Guide will be a meme deck enabler. Now, one reason just about any class might be willing to play Tour Guide is the opportunity to follow up with this next card on turn 2. Mana Feeder Panthara is a 2-mana, 2/3 beast with a battle cry to draw a card if you've used your hero power this turn. If not for Tour Guide, I would think this was meant almost exclusively for Hunters and Quest Shamans, and they're certainly more likely to get value from him than the other classes, but this could see play in a variety of decks. Mana Feeder isn't quite as exciting as Tour Guide for Face Hunter and Totem Shaman, but I could see Dragon Hunter, and maybe even Face Hunter, replacing a tracking with it. The fact that this is a beast does hurt Scavenger's Ingenuity's ability to grab Phase Stalker or Stone Tusk Boar from the deck, so it's a bit questionable, but I still think it would be worth running. And alongside Tour Guide, the ability to cycle through the deck while getting an extra hero power in will make this worth running in a few meta decks. This may work to cycle through the deck a tiny bit faster in a Quest Shaman looking to set up Dragon Queen Alexstrasza value play we mentioned a moment ago, but I don't see this as really setting up anything bizarre or unusual. A deck trying to cycle towards Chef Nomi has better options, and the beast tag on this doesn't really help it find a meme deck home. So I can't say Mana Feeder Panthara inspires or enables any meme decks. Now to look at a neutral minion that works pretty well with all the spell damage synergy cards we looked at earlier. Steward of Scrolls is a 5-mana 4/4 elemental with spell damage +1 and a battle cry to discover a spell. Vulpera Scoundrel, how you've grown. At the extra cost and reduction in stats, I don't think any class other than Mage and Shaman with their new spell power synergies will be interested in playing this elemental. In the current meta, there's no home for this guy, but in the upcoming meta, it's possible Steward of Scrolls finds a home. The Discover a Spell effect is really nice, but whether this sees play or not will be dependent on how desperate Mages and Shamans will be for extra spell damage. At 5 mana, there's not much else you can pair with this guy in a turn, and I find it hard to imagine this sticking to a board past turn 5. Mages might be able to freeze enemy boards to help keep this alive, but I'm not sure it'll be worth it. The Discover and spell damage bundled into a single card is nice, but I'd really like this guy to cost 1 less mana before I could see it join a meta deck. I may eat my words on this one, but I don't see Steward of Scrolls making the cut in the future meta either. But we will certainly toss this guy into our Ras Frostwhisper meme deck. It will be awesome when we discover a Primordial Studies or Potion of Illusion from this to allow us to lean into the meme even more. Now, when Mages and Shamans are playing around with the new spell damage synergies, they may also consider including this next neutral minion. Sorceress Substitute is a 6-mana 6/6 with a battle cry to summon a copy of itself if you have spell damage. There's zero chance this would see play in the current meta, and she feels a little too heavy to make the cut in the new Mage and Shaman archetypes. This is a lot of stats to drop on turn 6, which would be easy enough to set up with Primordial Studies or Rune Dagger. But any turn after 6, the opponent will most likely have a way to deal with her efficiently. I like the idea, and perhaps Mage or Shaman can exhaust opponents' board clears enough that she becomes the final nail in the coffin. But I'm thinking they'll prefer to run some over-the-top spells to make use of the spell damage for the final burst to take out opponents, rather than counting on a minion like this to stick on the board. She probably won't be meta later. Now, since this summons a copy of itself, that means we can buff it up like crazy in our hand before playing out, and we'll get double the value. So we can use this with Scrap Imp in Warlock, Galakron in Warrior, Survival of the Fittest in Druid, or alongside Anubisath Warbringer in Anka Death Rattle Rogue. We'll have to run a neutral spell damage minion, but Thalnos will probably feel fine as an activator. I don't think our spell damage hunter will be too excited to include this, but we can try that out as well. And in our quest spell power shaman with Rune Dagger and Tour Guide, we'll do a half Chef Nomi on turn 6 in an effort to overwhelm our opponent. And now for the quick reviews. No minion mages are surprisingly good at primordial studies right now, and several meta decks are looking forward to learning more about primordial power. Meme decks can't wait to get their hands on this textbook of spell damage. Raz Frostwhisper may have been missing the spell damage needed before its Scholomance, but now he's ready to channel AoE damage, and meme deck opponents won't believe their eyes when Mozaki and him burst them for absurd damage. Trick Totem may be tricking us, but it seems like slower decks might like trying it out, and we may pull off some crazy tricks when leaning into the RNG with meme decks. Current meta decks don't use Rune Dagger well, but this dagger will stab its way into the new meta, and memes pulled off with this will be engraved into opponents' memories. Molten Blast is missing a fundamental element for the current meta, but should blast its way into the new meta, and Knife Juggler is interested to see what Molten Dagger memes look like. Tidal Wave would be a massive failure in the current meta, but may sweep away the life from opponents in the new meta, and will flood the board with King Feor's help. Instructor Fireheart has won over Galakron's heart right now, and she'll be in complete control of the new meta while instructing Dwarven archaeologists how to meme. While the Treant Totems from Runic Carvings might be able to rush, they're a bit too slow for the current meta. With Vicina's help, these totems might carve themselves into the new meta, but Goru the Might Tree is overloaded with joy at the chance to meme with these. Groundskeeper won't be a keeper for the current meta, but she'll break ground for shamans in the new meta, and Lucent Bark is happy to have her tending him in memes. Speaker Gidra is too awkward for current meta decks, but there has to be a new meta deck willing to listen to her, and opponents will speak of the combo we pull off with her and Survival of the Fittest for ages. Well, probably just a few minutes, but still. Tour Guide will take a tour through meta decks with Hunter, and will guide a few classes through memes. Mana Feeder Panthara is best friends with Tour Guide in the meta, but its presence in the game won't be feeding any meme decks. Steward of Scrolls is too messy for the current meta, seems unlikely to discover a spot in the new meta, but will serve as a steward of memes for Ras Frostwhisper. Sorceress Substitute wouldn't be a substitute for any other card in meta decks, but she'll summon extra or buffed copies of herself in meme decks. And that's a wrap. The set is out, and we'll be experimenting with the new cards on stream later today. So come join in over at twitch.tv/SSAlchemist if you'd like to see the early experiments unfolding. We've got 2 more reviews coming out soon to finish out the set, and there will be many highlight videos of games coming soon. So drop a like if you enjoyed, and smash that subscribe button so you know when the next video comes out. You're awesome. Thank you for watching, and have an awesome day. Hail to thee, O Scholomance, the magic school.